Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of our podcast. Whether you're a beginner or an intermediate English learner, you're in the right place. Today, I'm going to share with you an incredible way to learn English that's natural, fun, and super effective. I'm talking about the Easy English method. This method is designed to help you learn English in a natural, immersive way. It's a system I've crafted based on techniques that have helped thousands of learners around the world speak English fluently and confidently. I've personally seen its success, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Now, let's get started with today's lesson. In Part 1, I'll introduce the Easy English method and its core principles. After that, in Part 2, we'll break down the key words and phrases from this discussion to make sure you fully understand them. Have you ever spent years studying English grammar but still felt stuck when it comes to actually speaking? That's because traditional methods focus too much on rules and memorization. They teach you to pass tests, not to communicate. The Easy English method is completely different. It's built on 5 core principles. Let's start with the first principle. Learn English naturally. Imagine how a baby learns their first language. Do they sit down with grammar books? No. They listen to their parents, mimic sounds, and eventually start forming sentences. This is the same approach we'll use. By focusing on listening, understanding, and repeating, you'll absorb English in a way that feels effortless. The goal isn't to memorize rules but to use English for real communication. For example, instead of studying complex grammar rules about past tense, you'll hear sentences like, "Yesterday, I went to the park," repeatedly. Over time, your brain will naturally understand that went is the past tense of go. You won't need to think about it, it will just feel right. Principle number 2, focus on listening. Listening is the foundation of language learning. Why? Because when you listen, you're training your brain to recognize the sounds, rhythm, and patterns of English. Think about how much easier it is to understand a song you've heard 100 times compared to one you've only heard once. That's the power of listening. With the Easy English method, you'll listen to English every single day. Don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. The goal is to immerse yourself in the language. Over time, you'll start to pick up words, phrases, and even grammar rules without even realizing it. For example, let's say you listen to a story about someone buying groceries. The more you hear phrases like, "I need to buy some apples," or, "Do you have any bananas?" the more natural these phrases will feel when you use them. Principle number 3, repetition is key. Now, let's talk about repetition. Have you ever noticed how you can recite the lyrics of a song you've heard 100 times but struggle to remember a sentence you've read once? That's because repetition helps you move information from short-term memory to long-term memory. In the Easy English method, repetition isn't boring, it's powerful. You'll listen to the same stories and lessons multiple times. Each time, you'll notice something new. Maybe the first time, you catch a few words. By the third or fourth time, you understand entire sentences. This deep learning process ensures that English becomes a part of you. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. At first, you might fall a few times, but with practice, it becomes second nature. English is the same way. The more you repeat, the more fluent you'll become. Principle number 4, mini-stories. Let's move on to one of the most exciting parts of this method, mini-stories and Q&A. Forget about boring textbooks. Instead, you'll learn through engaging stories that are easy to follow. Each story is designed to teach you vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation in context. Here's how it works. First, you'll listen to a short story. Then, I'll ask you simple questions about the story. For example, if the story is about Sarah going to the beach, I might ask, "Where did Sarah go?" You'll answer, "She went to the beach." This Q&A format helps you think in English and respond quickly, just like you would in a real conversation. The best part? You don't need to be perfect. Even if your answers are short or contain mistakes, that's okay. The goal is to practice thinking and speaking in English without hesitation. Principle number 5. Emotional connection. Finally, let's talk about emotional connection. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to remember something when it's connected to a strong emotion? Whether it's a funny joke, a touching story, or a personal experience, emotions make learning stick. That's why the Easy English method focuses on stories and lessons that resonate with you. Instead of dry, academic topics, we'll explore themes that are interesting, fun, and relatable. When you're emotionally engaged, you'll learn faster and retain more. For example, imagine a story about a character overcoming a challenge. As you connect with their journey, you'll not only enjoy the lesson but also remember the language used to tell the story. Now that you know the principles behind the Easy English method, let's move on to part 2 of today's lesson. In this part, we'll break down some key words and phrases from what I just shared. These are words you'll hear often in our lessons, so it's important to understand them deeply. Let's dive in. Now it's time for part 2 of today's lesson, vocabulary breakdown and practice. Earlier, we talked about the Easy English method and its core principles. In this part, we'll focus on some key words and phrases from that discussion to help you understand and use them confidently. This is an important step because understanding vocabulary deeply will make it easier for you to use it naturally. Let's dive into the first word. The first word is naturally. You probably remember this word from the phrase learn English naturally. Naturally means doing something in a way that feels natural, normal, or without effort. For example, she naturally smiled when she saw her best friend. Children learn languages naturally by listening and copying. When we say learn English naturally, we mean learning in a way that feels natural and easy, just like how you learned your first language as a child. Next, we have the word foundation. A foundation is the base or starting point of something strong and long-lasting. Think about a building. It needs a strong foundation to stand tall. In the Easy English method, we say, listening is the foundation of language learning. This means listening is the most important first step to becoming fluent in English. Here are some examples. A good education is the foundation for success. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship. Now let's talk about repetition. This word means doing something again and again. Repetition is how you master a skill. The more you repeat, the better you get. For example, repetition helps you memorize new vocabulary. He improved his pronunciation through constant repetition. In the Easy English method, repetition means listening to the same stories or lessons multiple times until you fully understand and remember them. Another important word is hesitation. Hesitation means pausing or being unsure before you do something. For example, she spoke without hesitation, showing confidence. If you feel hesitation, take a deep breath and try again. When we practice mini stories and Q&A, the goal is to answer without hesitation. This builds your ability to think and speak quickly in English. Finally, let's talk about engaged or emotional connection. To be engaged means to be interested and involved. Emotional connection means feeling something deeply, like happiness, excitement, or empathy. For example, the audience was fully engaged in the speaker's story. Learning is easier when you feel an emotional connection to the material. When you're engaged, learning doesn't feel like a chore. It becomes fun and exciting. That's why the Easy English method uses stories and topics that make you feel something. Now it's time to practice. I'll ask you some questions using the words we just learned. Pause the video and say your answers out loud. Ready? How do children learn languages naturally? Pause to answer. Why is listening the foundation of language learning? Pause to answer. What is an example of repetition in your daily life? Pause to answer. Have you ever felt hesitation when speaking English? How did you overcome it? Pause to answer. Can you think of a time when you were emotionally engaged in a lesson or story? Pause to answer. Great job! If you didn't know the answers right away, that's okay. The more you practice, the easier it will get. That's it for today's lesson. In this part, we broke down some key vocabulary words and phrases, and you had the chance to practice using them. Remember, repetition and listening are your best friends. Feel free to rewatch this lesson and practice your answers again. In the next part of the Easy English Method, we'll introduce a fun mini-story and Q&A session to help you use what you've learned in real-life situations. See you next time, and remember, English is easy when you make it fun.